I haven't made a video like this in a good long while, but considering the fact that I can't shut up about this game in public lately, I figured that was more reason than any to actually jot my words down about it in a video, so here we go. The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom just came out, not even like 2 weeks ago now, and I have not felt this way or this strongly about a Zelda game in, quite frankly, I don't even know how long. It's been a long time since we got a 2D Zelda that wasn't a remake or a spin-off, and I, like many, have been eagerly awaiting what Nintendo was gonna do with the next 2D Zelda. I'm not very quiet about the fact that, despite loving 3D Zelda, I haven't been a fan of the recent games. 3D Zelda is taking a different direction, at least for the time being, and I've accepted that. 2D Zelda, however, from what we've seen, really hasn't changed all that much. However, only a few months ago now, Echoes of Wisdom was announced, revealing a really big switch-up for the series. This new game would not be starring Link as the player character, but rather Zelda herself, and not only that, traditional combat would be taking a step back for a more strategic and passive approach. Combat would still exist, and we were shown that it would in the trailer, but not in the way that we've been accustomed to up until this point. Not only that, but the entire game would hinge on a very big main mechanic: being able to create copies of dozens and dozens of inanimate objects and monsters you encounter throughout the adventure. A sort of crafting mechanic not too dissimilar to something like Tears of the Kingdom, but definitely taking its own approach. I was a little apprehensive about it, but I was also eager because, as I'll get to, 2D Zelda has not left an impact on me in a very long time. The last main entry 2D Zelda we got happened all the way back in 2013 with A Link Between Worlds. I know it's cliche to say, but it's kind of insane to think about the fact that it's been over a decade since that game came out. Of course, Triforce Heroes was also a thing, but as I alluded to a minute ago, that was more of a spin-off co-op thing and not a fully fledged new entry in the series. That being said, I've always had a mixed relationship with A Link Between Worlds. I've said it for years now, but I just never cared for it. Not in the sense that I didn't enjoy it, because I did. I actually enjoyed it a lot, but when I say I never cared for it, I mean to say, after I was finished, I didn't really care afterwards that I played it. I didn't really think about it much, and I haven't thought about it much since. Mechanically, and in terms of design, A Link Between Worlds was great. The game's main mechanic opened up so many different unique ideas for puzzles and exploration, and as a gameplay experience, it was nothing but solid. Save for the fact that pretty much all the dungeons are basically a fixed difficulty. Actually, scratch what I just said, that actually pissed me off quite a bit. Little diversion here, but A Link Between Worlds changed up the formula just a bit by making the dungeon order non-linear, which was interesting in concept, but in execution, there really wasn't any good way to pull it off without having all the dungeons be static in difficulty, save for the final one. So I do have to say, the scaling of difficulty in that game sucks just for the sheer fact that it doesn't exist. However, as I said, the game is fun as hell and all of its puzzles and everything are great. Now, if you're wondering why I didn't care about it after the fact, well, it's because A Link Between Worlds is a strange entry that sort of sits somewhere between sequel and remake/reboot, because it lifts so much of its content, world, and overall aesthetic from A Link to the Past. It never really felt like an impactful game to me in terms of it being its own unique adventure. I don't know if anybody else agrees with me, and it's understandable if you don't, but because it borrows so heavily from the SNES Classic, it didn't truly scratch the itch of being a unique, brand new adventure, and because of that, despite being fun, it never had a lasting impact on me. It's also no secret that the majority of people didn't like Phantom Hourglass or Spirit Tracks, both of which are also sequels to the Wind Waker and stray quite a bit from the traditional 2D Zelda setup, so honestly, in my mind, this itch has not been scratched since, well, Minish Cap. This brings me to Echoes of Wisdom, a truly brand new adventure with not only its own unique story, but its own unique map. Geographically, Echoes of Wisdom's map does borrow from A Link to the Past, but only in the sense of where the different towns and Hyrulean landmarks we all know are laid out. It's similar to A Link to the Past map on a macro level, but that's about it. And to be fair, this does make sense. I mean, Hyrule is Hyrule. That map is also, frankly, enormous for a 2D Zelda game, which I was not expecting. There is so much to explore and so many secrets to find, and it's honestly so hard to stay on track just because of the amount of freedom the game gives you to explore right from the start. Like I said before, I'm really not a fan of Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. And I think the main reason above all else, besides the fact that those games struggle with the concept of traditional dungeons, is that no amount of exploring feels of consequence to me. Of course, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are loaded with secrets, but a lot of those secrets just end up being weapons I'll just break anyway. On top of that, the world is just entirely too big for me to want to explore, and the variation in terrain and areas just don't give me enough incentive to want to look around. If anything, it's just overwhelming and gives me too much freedom. It kind of just makes me want to make a beeline to whatever the next main objective is. Granted, that's still, for the most part, how I play Echoes of Wisdom, but because everything is simplified here and on a much smaller scale, everything just seems a bit more deliberate. With a smaller game like this, there's just a whole lot less room for padding, and that makes me want to see what's out there, even when it's a little distraction on the way to the next main quest objective. And the simple terrain in this game is very inviting because the game is basically asking you to break it due to its main mechanic. I think the freedom in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is so overwhelming that it makes me not really want to do anything. In Echoes of Wisdom, your tool set is much more limited, and it makes me want to see what I can do with the few tools that I'm given. Now, the best way that I can think to describe this main Echo mechanic for anyone who knows what I'm talking about is it feels like debug mode in the classic Sonic games. For anyone not aware, in the Genesis Sonic games, you could input a code that unlocks debug mode, a mode that basically lets you infinitely spawn any number of enemies, objects, or items. I used to mess around with this a lot, like endlessly, when I was a kid, and it's a feature that was later implemented into Sonic Mania. Basically, Echoes of Wisdom kind of feels like that, only actually worked into a core game mechanic. It's basically taking some of the mechanics of a level creator and implementing it into an actual adventure, like narratively. It makes it so much fun to use random objects to try and hoist yourself on top of terrain that feels like you're not supposed to access yet. I think that's the main difference for me here. Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom feel like a building game. It feels like a game that gives me unlimited tools to do whatever I can dream of. Echoes of Wisdom makes me feel like I'm breaking the game with limited resources I have access to. It feels like stuff I'm not supposed to do. Everything is just a lot more simplified, but because of that, I don't feel as overwhelmed by my options, and I feel more inclined to try and break stuff. And of course, not that there was really any worry for this, but traditional dungeons are just so refreshing considering the recent 3D games, and the options for puzzles are also expanded by the nature of the game's main mechanic itself. In a way, the game kind of feels like there's a Game Genie code built into it. So as I said earlier though, this is the first time a 2D Zelda has felt impactful to me since Minish Cap. I've already stated why that is, but Echoes of Wisdom has one more weird little thing that makes it seem so cool in my eyes. So, Link's Awakening was always my favorite 2D Zelda. After Link's Awakening, we got the Oracle games. We can argue all day long about the Zelda timeline, but in context of release, the Oracle games were not sequels to Link's Awakening. However, because of the fact that Link's Awakening's framework was used to build the Oracle games, those games felt like sequels to Link's Awakening, but in a way that felt completely unique because the story was totally different and they took place in a different location, i.e. not ripping Link's Awakening's world and trying to make another game out of it. And I gotta state that because I'm not contradicting myself here. It's not the same situation as Link Between Worlds. Then we have the Link's Awakening remake, a really great and faithful recreation of the original game, and then we have Echoes of Wisdom, a brand new game built on the framework of the Link's Awakening remake. In a weird way, Echoes of Wisdom kind of feels like another sequel in the vein of those games. Granted, it does its own new thing entirely and takes a totally new twist, but in terms of spirit, the game reminds me of the feeling I got when I played those old Game Boy games, and it feels like a natural progression of that. In a weird way, it almost feels like I got this lost Link's Awakening sequel that never happened. And I need to reiterate, not in a way that is in any way derivative. And this all brings me to the one main huge difference Echoes of Wisdom brings to the table that separates it from every single Zelda game before it, and I swear to God, do not bring up the CDI. Echoes of Wisdom stars, for the first time, a playable Zelda. Now, if everything was the same and Zelda just wielded a sword, this would have been of absolutely zero consequence, just a simple model swap. But because Zelda isn't a warrior like Link, she instead uses this new power of echo creation to not only solve the world's multitude of puzzles, but to defend herself. This was the big thing for me. It was at least the main reason I was kind of apprehensive about it. The concept seemed a little odd to me because I've been so conditioned to expect sword combat in Zelda. However, after playing for like 10 minutes, I got over it. Not to say combat isn't janky and a bit cumbersome, because it totally is, but it also kind of forces you to think outside the box and come up with non-traditional solutions that a sword would normally easily solve. Granted, you do have a power-up that lets you act a bit offensively and draw a sword among a couple other combat options, but these, for the majority of the time anyway, are mostly not really a great option because the sword fighter form is a limited resource, so you quite literally need to pick your battles in that regard. Don't get me wrong, I would have loved to seen some kind of unlockable Link mode akin to something like Richter mode in Symphony of the Night, but I do understand why it's not here, and I'm totally fine with it. Yes, the combat is a little janky, but the whole game is a little janky. It's just a weird game, dude, but it's fun. Echoes of Wisdom is doing its own thing, and I'm okay with that, because as a Zelda game, Link or no, it has thus far knocked it completely out of the park. I still haven't finished it, and I'm probably only about halfway through at this point, but I like this game so much that I couldn't help but talk about it. It's that good. If you like traditional 2D Zelda, you need to throw all caution to the wind and play this game. It's the best and most unique and memorable 2D Zelda has been in, well, at least in my opinion, 2 decades. If you haven't picked it up yet, you absolutely need to. I expected a 2D Zelda to be good. I didn't expect it to be just as good as it actually is, and the incredibly high review scores it's been receiving are well deserved. Go get this game. Hey, thanks for watching the video. If you liked it and want to see more, there's a couple other videos right there you can check out. And if you want to see everything I upload, subscribe and then tap the bell icon. And if you want to help support the channel, we got a Patreon right there too. Toodles.